July 6, 2019. Teterboro Airport, New Jersey. A federal task force is waiting on the tarmac. A private jet lands from Paris. Jeffrey Epstein steps off. And two realities collide. In one reality, a federal indictment. 2 counts: sex trafficking of minors, decades of evidence, grand jury testimony, court-filed financial records, victim statements, an arrest by the FBI NYPD Crimes Against Children Task Force. In the other reality, a mythology, a shadow government, a list of names, a network that reached everywhere, a story that had been building on forums and feeds and recommendation queues since before this man was ever arrested. Both realities were running at the same time. That's the problem this series is here to document, because by the time the legal case ended, before a verdict was ever reached, the internet's version had metastasized into something that contaminated congressional hearings, distorted jury pools, hijacked a murder investigation, and sent a man with an AR-15 into a pizza restaurant. This is episode 00, the prologue. Before we go inside the machine, we need to understand what the machine was working with. Let's start with what is in the record. March 2005. A woman reports to Palm Beach police that her stepdaughter received $300 in exchange for sexual activity with Jeffrey Epstein, a financier who lived in a mansion on the Intracoastal Waterway. Detectives begin investigating. Over the next year, they document a recruitment pattern. Girls as young as 14 were brought to Epstein's Palm Beach estate. They were paid for massages. The massages turned sexual. According to grand jury testimony later made public, the girls were also paid to recruit other girls. In July 2006, Palm Beach Police Detective Joe Riccari testifies before a grand jury. The scope he describes is broad. Multiple victims, repeated conduct, a deliberate system. By May 2007, Assistant U.S. Attorney Marie Villafana has drafted a federal response. 53 pages, 60 counts, a federal indictment that, if filed, would have sent Jeffrey Epstein to federal prison for the rest of his life. It was never filed. On September 24, 2007, one day before Villafana was prepared to indict, Epstein signed a non-prosecution agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami. The federal investigation ended. The victims were not informed. A federal district court would later find that keeping them in the dark violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act, though on appeal, the 11th Circuit held that the Act's protections had not formally attached because no charges were ever filed. In June 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida state court, not to federal sex trafficking charges, but to 2 state counts: solicitation of prostitution from a minor and procurement of minors to engage in prostitution. He was sentenced to 18 months. He served approximately 13 months in the Palm Beach County Stockade, not a state prison, and was granted work release after roughly 3.5 months. Here's what we can verify about the scope of what was covered up. According to Julie K. Brown's Perversion of Justice investigation in the Miami Herald, a series that won the George Polk Award, Epstein was suspected of sexually abusing more than 100 underage girls. That reporting was based on documented police files, court records, and survivor interviews. The 53-page indictment became a ghost. The case became a footnote. For 11 years, while Epstein served his 13 months, he retained his properties, documented in court filings and public records. A Manhattan townhouse on East 71st Street, more than 28,000 square feet, one of the largest private residences in the city, 9 floors. A private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James, 71.6 acres, purchased in 1998. A ranch in New Mexico, approximately 10,000 acres, near Stanley, southeast of Santa Fe. Properties in Florida and Paris. Between 1999 and 2007, financial records introduced as evidence in a later federal trial show that Epstein transferred at least $30.7 million to Ghislaine Maxwell across multiple transactions. This is documented fact. These are court exhibits. Here is the central paradox this series will return to again and again. The documented reality was remarkable enough to generate its own mythology. When you have a convicted sex offender with a private island, a Manhattan mansion, a 10,000-acre ranch, and documented wire transfers in the tens of millions, you don't need to invent anything. The conspiracy theorists didn't. They just kept going. While Epstein lived as a registered sex offender between 2008 and 2019, something was being constructed online that would eventually swallow this case whole. November 2016, an anonymous forum called 4chan. Over approximately 25 hours, users on 4chan's politics board worked through emails published by WikiLeaks, the hacked correspondence of Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. In those emails, users claimed to find coded references to child sexual abuse. The references were food words, cheese pizza, a long-used 4chan shorthand for child pornography, a mention of a Washington pizza restaurant. No evidence of any crime at the restaurant was ever found. No charges, no victims, no investigation that produced anything. But the theory, which would become known as Pizzagate, spread from 4chan to Reddit to Twitter within days. And when it did, it picked up the Epstein case as evidence. Because here was a real case, documented, court-filed, publicly adjudicated, of a wealthy man running a documented child sex trafficking operation. The facts of the Epstein case became ammunition for claims that were fabricated. That's the architecture this series is built to explain. 1 year later, October 28, 2017, the same forum. A new anonymous account, Q Clearance Patriot. The first Q drop claimed Hillary Clinton was about to be arrested. It predicted military tribunals. It was wrong on every specific prediction. It generated a mass movement anyway. QAnon was, in significant part, built on the architecture of Pizzagate. And both were built, in significant part, on the real documented wreckage of the Epstein case. The documented truth made the invented mythology more believable. That is the central mechanism this series exists to explain. December 4, 2016. Comet Ping Pong Restaurant, Washington, D.C. A 28-year-old man named Edgar Madison Welch drove approximately 350 miles from Salisbury, North Carolina. He brought an AR-15-style rifle. He fired 3 shots inside the restaurant. No one was injured. He surrendered to police. He told investigators he had come to self-investigate the Pizzagate conspiracy. In June 2017, Welch was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison by U.S. District Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. The judge described the facts as breathtaking. No evidence of any conspiracy was found in the restaurant. That was one consequence. The legal system produced others. In July 2019, 11 years after the non-prosecution agreement, a federal grand jury in the Southern District of New York returned a sealed indictment against Jeffrey Epstein. 1 count of conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors and 1 count of sex trafficking of minors. The indictment alleged that Epstein had paid girls as young as $1,400 and paid victims to recruit other victims. Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport on July 6th. A federal judge denied bail. He was placed at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his cell at 6:30 in the morning. He had been unmonitored for approximately 8 hours. The New York City medical examiner ruled his death a suicide by hanging. A 2023 report by the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General confirmed that ruling. The OIG found serious misconduct by MCC staff. Guards had falsified records, but found no evidence of criminality in connection with Epstein's death. The case was dismissed on August 29, 2019. No verdict, no trial. Here is what the internet did with that sequence of events. The lack of a trial, combined with the scale of the documented facts and the genuine failure of federal prosecutors in 2007, created an information vacuum. And the internet's machinery, built on engagement, on novelty, on the amplification of outrage, filled that vacuum immediately, not with verified facts, with conjecture, with fabricated claims, with lists of names that had never appeared in any court filing. That machinery had been running since 2016. By 2019, it was fully operational. Ghislaine Maxwell was indicted in 2020. She stood trial in 2021. During pre-trial proceedings, a YouTuber obtained the link to a virtual hearing and live-streamed audio to approximately 14,000 listeners. Reports at the time noted that among the 14,000 viewers were apparent adherents of the QAnon conspiracy movement based on the YouTube comment section. Maxwell's legal team demanded in-person proceedings. The court agreed. A documented criminal proceeding was disrupted by the audience that the internet had built around this case. The conspiracy had entered the courtroom, not as evidence, but as a presence. On December 29, 2021, a federal jury convicted Maxwell on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. In June 2022, she was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The conviction was real. The sentence was real. 2 convictions when you include Epstein's 2008 guilty plea. And yet by 2021, the conspiracy ecosystem had constructed a parallel version of this case, so large, so internally detailed, so emotionally resonant, that for millions of people, the verified facts were almost beside the point. November 2025, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, 427-1 in the House, unanimously in the Senate. President Trump signed it. On January 30, 2026, the DOJ released approximately 3 million pages in a single day, part of a total release of approximately 3.5 million responsive pages under the Act. The database is public and searchable at justice.gov/Epstein. It includes 180,000 images and 2,000 videos. According to Al Jazeera's analysis of the DOJ database as of February 2026, Epstein's assistant Leslie Groff has 157,613 documented mentions. Ghislaine Maxwell, 13,169. Lawmakers noted that more than 6 million pages were identified as potentially responsive. The DOJ states the approximately 3.5 million released constitutes full compliance with the Act's scope. The files are real. The record is available. Investigators, journalists, and the public can search it now. That transparency matters. It is the antidote, imperfect, incomplete, but functional, to the opacity that made mythology possible in the first place. This series is about how that opacity worked, how platforms amplified it, how group psychology deepened it, how algorithms fed it, and how, at the intersection of a real documented crime and a manufactured mythology, something broke in the way millions of people understand what is true. The Epstein case didn't cause that break. It revealed it. Subscribe for the verified record, the documented timeline of how the internet builds belief. Next time, November 2016. A group of anonymous users on 4chan spent 25 hours combing through leaked emails. They find a mention of a pizza restaurant, they build a conspiracy from nothing, and 3 weeks later, a man drives approximately 350 miles with an AR-15. We go back to where it started. Next episode.